The time is at hand.
From Williamson, West Virginia, the gateway to the crackheads. This is In Dark Places. What kind of distractions have you seen today? Is there another virus? More alien attacks, maybe? Just anything to keep us distracted. I don't know. I'm kind of done with it all. I want to just go find me a cave and live in that. Get away from all the nonsense. All the people bickering about politics and stuff like that. It's just so stupid. I'm done. That's why I have Bigfoot stories for you today. My childhood best friend, her grandparents, had huge acres of land down south. It was acres of forests and streams, even some prairie fields. They had a whole hunting club based off this place. As kids, we would drive out there to hang out and do nature stuff on holidays and long weekends off for school. One year, post-Thanksgiving weekend, we were out four-wheeling, and we drove past him on four-wheelers. I guess a Bigfoot. Me and my friend both saw it. Could have been a bear or a hog, but they don't run away on two legs. While my dad was stationed at Alameda Air Base in San Francisco, he and some of his shipmates decided to go camping while on leave. They drove to a sporting goods store, I believe near Berkeley, to get what they needed. While there, they met two professors from Berkeley. Apparently, these two professors were greenhorns, as my dad called them, and knew nothing about camping or supplies, so they asked my dad to help them pick out what they needed. Then, they told my dad that a Northern California logging company had contacted them at the university and asked them to come up to Northern California to investigate some large animal that was destroying things in one of their logging camps. They told my dad that someone or something was really wreaking havoc in the area and the workers couldn't get anything done. Plus it was terrifying the loggers. My dad explained to the professors that he and his family operated as hunting guides in western Colorado, San Luis Valley, near Wolf Creek Pass, so he was very skilled at tracking. They asked if he and his buddies wanted to come up with them and help track. I don't know exactly where he said they went, but I do remember it was near the California-Oregon state line. I believe it was close to the ocean, but I could be off on that detail. He said that when they got to the camp and scouted around the area, they found several giant footprints and plaster cast them. He said it looked like something or someone was scouting or walking around the perimeter of the camp. He went on that the workers took them to the fuel depot where there were several footprints to a collection of 55-gallon drums of diesel fuel. Something had walked up to, then around the depot, and then finally picked up one of the barrels and then carried it off toward a nearby ravine. He said that the footprints became significantly deeper as the creature walked away from the fuel storage area, which would indicate that whatever had picked up the barrel had carried it without sitting it down, and then threw both the barrel and also a large tractor tire into the ravine, and then walked back into the woods. That night they had a fire going, and everyone was sitting around it, drinking beers and shooting the breeze. After a while, my dad said he noticed eyeshine that appeared to be 8 to 9 feet high just outside the firelight watching them. I believe that he said there were 2 sets of eyes, but I could be wrong. He told me that he had quietly worked his way back around the group, and he circled around the camp as quietly as he could to sneak up on whatever was standing close by. He said that no matter how hard he tried, including removing his boots and trying to sneak up in his socks, he never could get anywhere near whatever creature had the eyeshine, and that it really frustrated him as a professional tracker because he couldn't get close to the animal. He'd return to the group, and 10 to 20 minutes later the eyeshine would return, and he'd quietly try again. Over the years, I asked him several times, "Do you think it was a Bigfoot?" Immediately he would respond, "No, I can't say it was a Bigfoot because I never actually saw the animal." However, we did find some very large footprint tracks. However, I know that there was something really big out there that is a better tracker than me, and whatever that is, it had really big feet. But exactly what I saw out there, I have no idea what it was. Parenthetically, I think he said that the eye shine was either an emerald green or fire orange. It's been a long time since I talked to him about it, and now he's going senile. My daughter and I were camping. At the time she was between 7 and 8 years old. I sent her to pour out some pickle juice in the tree line about 50 feet, give or take, from our campsite. She was in my sight the entire time. All of a sudden, she stiffened up, as if something startled her. I got up and asked her if she was okay. She said, "Dad, somebody is back there." I walked up to her and looked into the woods, not seeing anyone. I asked where they were, and she pointed and said, "They ran from behind that tree to that tree." Still not seeing or hearing anything, I asked her what they looked like. She stated, "Way bigger than you." Somewhat concerning, as I am about 6 feet and about 300 pounds. Then I asked her what they were wearing. Instead of saying articles of clothing, she said they were brown and black and kind of white. I walked a few feet into the woods and still did not see or hear anyone or anything. It then clicked in her brain that she had seen a Bigfoot. I could not get her to stop whooping and trying to do tree knocks for the rest of the weekend. My daughter is now 18. While she doesn't remember the finer details of that day, she states the impression left on her was the size of an individual. This was when I was about 18 years old. I'm now 24, but I went camping with some family members at the border of Oklahoma, and there were some really flat lands out there. And there was also a really long ways to get back to any type of civilization. We were staying out in a cabin in the middle of nowhere. It was about 2 a.m. at night. I was still awake, lying on a couch. The cabin was built to where there was 2 big windows at the front, and you could see about 2 miles from there. I had my body facing the windows so that I could look outside. Beautiful view, by the way. It was a dark night, darker than usual, and you could hear the frogs outside. But it had suddenly gone quiet while I was awake for those couple of hours, and felt like I was being watched. So I looked out of the right front window, and I saw a huge silhouette standing by a very large tree, and compared to the darkness of it, it could have reached about 6 to 7 feet tall. I had to really look, but it stood there for a couple of seconds, and I'm sure it knew that I noticed it. I saw it move across the flat field and away from the cabin, and it really spooked me. I had no flashlight, so I couldn't tell you if it had eye shine. In conclusion, I'm not saying it's a Bigfoot, but there is a possibility. I'm on a hike on Buck Mountain Loop in the back country of Silver Falls State Park, Oregon. I'm getting a little tired and am keeping an eye out for a log to rest on for a bit. I've been on this trail a few times, and remember there is a clearing coming up that has a fallen tree on it. I enter the clearing and make for the log. I sit down and I'm resting for a moment, and something happens. I hear or feel like a huff or something. It startles me. I get up from the log immediately, thinking bear. I'm looking all around, and I just don't see anything. I feel or hear something again as I'm starting to leave. It's hard to explain. It's like a low-frequency huffing sound. When I first looked back, I thought maybe like when a deer gets mad. At the same time, my mind is still on bear, and I know it's important for them not to be surprised coming up on you. So I start singing and continued on my hike. I went on my way, a little bit annoyed that I couldn't rest. Strange footprint sighting, Southern Colorado, 2017. I was hiking through the San Juans with a friend in late winter, early spring. We were looking for antler sheds in the area that I have hunted since I was a kid. We parked right off the edge of the road and began walking south. We had to cross a hill that was parallel to the road that had very little tree cover. There was a ravine running through the bottom that had a small stand of trees in it. All the ground was dry, but in the timber there were patches of snow about 2 inches deep, where the shade was thick from the trees. When we got into the trees, we turned west and walked about 40 yards. That's when we saw a single footprint in a patch of snow. I could tell it was less than a day old because the snow in the bottom of the track had not frozen. The footprint was equal in length to my size 12 shoe, but it was easily twice as wide. Our minds were blown. We could not see any other prints nearby, so we walked in spirals around the footprint, hoping that we would find another track in any direction, without success. We never found another track, and were left with nothing but questions. I've been to this area camping a few times, and in the past I've always camped at the campgrounds. In the last few years, my current girlfriend actually prefers roughing it, so we make it a point to camp in the middle of nowhere without anybody around. When we go on camping trips, we usually do multi-day overlanding 4x4 style, so we stay in a different place almost every night, where most people won't go to. This brings me to the first night of our 5-day camping trip on 4th of July weekend 2019. This particular night was one of the weirdest camping experiences that I've ever experienced in my 30 plus years of camping, and I really don't know how weird it was until I arrived home, but I'll get to that later. So I had found this spot a few miles from the organized campground a few years ago, and I just put it in my memory bank. It's pretty easy to find because it's not far off the main dirt road, and I could tell it was usually used during the hunting season. When we camp, we always bring our dog, a mini American Shepherd. Most people know them as a mini Aussie. She usually runs around exploring, but this afternoon, she stayed near us the whole time. I just thought she didn't feel good from the 3-hour ride there. As the sun went down, we started a fire, ate some burgers. I was smoking a tobacco pipe, and we were just looking at the stars. Around 9 p.m. is when things first got weird. I heard this whooping noise that I've never heard in the woods before, probably a couple 100 yards away. My first thought was it was an elk, but then I told myself that it isn't the sound that an elk makes. So my natural train of thought goes to maybe it's an animal I've never heard before. About 10 minutes later, we heard this really long bang, and my initial reaction was a gunshot from a hunter. I have a lot of experience with all types of firearms, so I knew that it wasn't a gunshot. It wasn't hunting season, and you can only hunt during daylight hours. The only way I can describe it was that it was like somebody hitting a tin roof or a metal sheet with a sledgehammer, one time, about 100 yards away. I knew there wasn't any structures within at least a couple miles, so by this point I'm getting weirded out. My girlfriend is just sitting there enjoying the fire and not really worried about anything. Meanwhile, me and the dog were on high alert. A few minutes later, I see a white light behind my girlfriend in the distance, but when I looked directly at it, I couldn't see it. If I looked to the side, I could see it out of my peripheral vision. I told my girlfriend to turn around, and when she looked toward it, it disappeared. When she faced the fire, it came back. We did this a couple times, and then it didn't come back. Probably 30 seconds to a minute total. She never saw anything, and I only saw what I can only describe as blurry white light with no discernible shape. At this point, I'm ready for bed, and we crawled into the safety of our Jeep, locked ourselves in. We actually fell asleep fairly quickly. The rest of the night was uneventful, and so was the rest of our 5-day trip. When I woke up in the morning, the dog was in a much better mood, and I walked toward where I saw the light. It was directly in my line of sight from the campfire, through the trees, out to about 100 yards from our camp, and about 8 feet off the ground. The ground didn't look disturbed at all around the area, and I couldn't even guess what it was, and why I couldn't look directly at it without blurry vision. When we arrived home, I was wanting to watch the new Missing 411 movie, The Hunted. As we watched it and got to the audio recordings done by the hunters at 1:16:01, My blood ran cold, and my girlfriend looked at me and said, "That's what we heard." We only heard the whoops 3 or 4 times. That was it. I've been a missing 411 fan for years. I don't have any of the books yet, though, so I'm always extra cautious in the woods, especially if I have my children with me. From the missing map, as far as I can tell, this isn't a spot where people usually go missing. Anyway, that is my honest-to-God experience. I was completely sober, and I'm not the type to go looking for paranormal stuff, nor have I ever experienced or heard anything like that before or since. And yes, I've been camping since. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it when I think about it. Do you suffer from allergies? Let me tell you about this great product I found. It's another Bigfoot report. I'm sorry. I don't do ads. I hate those things. Here's the report. My best one was while mountain biking in the Hoosier National Forest, and I had something growling and throwing rocks at me. I never actually saw anything, but it was growling and extremely aggressive. I backed out of there after a brief Mexican standoff. Another time I was in the woods and was overcome with complete fear. I don't know what that was either. I saw glowing red eyes watching me at the tree line. I was armed. I am always armed in the woods. I'm also a former Marine, and I don't really rattle easily. Whatever that was made me the most terrified I've ever been in my entire life. The last one was when I was a kid. We had something killing our dogs in the area. My Great Dane mix got ripped to shreds. They said it was a bear or a cat, but we only have small bears and cats are rare. My dad and the neighbors went out hunting it over one weekend. They saw something, but they never talked about what they saw, and I wasn't allowed to roam in the woods. After that, we pretty much quit hunting until we moved away from that ridge, which is odd because we lived completely off-grid. We lived off the land. Dad sold the cabin shortly after the incident, and we moved 450 miles away. Mine was living in Oregon. The house had a big back window. It was pretty high off the ground. There was a bit of a trench from some plumbing work. I stand 6'4", and my head might have gone halfway up to the window. One night, I was sitting on the couch watching TV when it looked like someone walking by the window. Their head was at the top of the window. Didn't register at first, and then was the WTF moment. This thing had to be at least a foot, if not 2, taller than me walking past the window. It's a 10ish at night in a small town in Oregon. Next day I was throwing out cat litter. Saw bare footprints in the mud. No distinctions since there was rain, but the print had to be at least a size 16 or bigger since I wear 13. I spent 6 years as an Army Ranger. I don't know how many firefights I've been in. It's been a lot. I've seen some stuff, but this was a genetic level of fear. Like I was programmed to fear this thing. I've never been more terrified. Suddenly, it made sense why the woods creep me out, even when I'm armed. My wife, kids, and I were camping in Oregon. It's going to sound funny, but my ex-wife and I were being intimate when this all happened. We were camping on the eastern side of Cougar Reservoir and had just put our 2 kids down to bed a while earlier. We were stopped by our dog, who literally got between us. We listened and could hear someone walking. I could feel its footsteps reverberating through the ground. They were slow, but covered a big range. When we first heard them, he was about 100 meters out. With 5 or 6 steps, he easily covered 40 meters. They were footsteps, padded feet, 2-legged cadence. Not walking fast at all, rather slow, but covering massive amounts of distance with each step. The footsteps sounded like a baseball bat hitting a heavy bag. I got out of the tent and looked at it. I thought for a second it could have even been an African elephant because how huge it was. The thing was massive, about 10 feet tall. It was definitely not a bear. I lived not far away with an apple orchard, as well as a river that brought salmon every year. and dealt with black bears regularly on my property. This was about 3 times bigger than the biggest black bear I've ever seen. It walked and looked like a huge person. I had my 9mm, which would have done nothing. It started to charge me. Actually, it was more than that. It advanced slowly and stopped several times. It would start advancing as soon as my eyes turned away. I don't know how it was able to see. It was dense brush and dark. It got closer and stopped about 12 feet in front of me. It was not as scared as I was, not by a long shot. I could see it was hairy and dark colored, no eye shine, and no smell, even though I stood right in front of it. I remember thinking I could almost lay down and it would be as wide as his shoulders. They were massively wide, between 4.5 to 5 feet. I stood my ground. My wife loaded up the kids while I put myself between them and this thing. She acted swiftly with zero panic. It was actually pretty gangster to see her run toward it and me to get to my son. I had to stay in front of it because of how close it got to the tent. I was sure I was going to be the first to die. I was going to shoot its eyes before it killed me. With my kids on the line, I was going to do everything I could. I had a chance. I'm an ex-Army Ranger and I do a lot of shooting. Hitting its eye, even if it moved fast, wasn't out of the question. I felt like I could pull it off, and I had no choice. That's why I stood there and didn't run. I knew I probably wasn't going to make it, but if I could fight enough for my ex-wife and kids to get out, I was going to die doing exactly that. But I didn't get the sense that this thing wanted to kill me, for a few reasons. First off, it could have easily killed me already. I think seeing me stand my ground made this thing respect me. Plus, it came in loud. If something wanted to kill you, it was going to be quiet. This thing was trying to be loud, scary, and not stealthy at all. Its advancing me definitely made me question my assessment. But it just didn't seem like it wanted me dead. Just gone. Shoo. It was being nice and asking me to leave. This all happened in a span of approximately 30 seconds to maybe a minute. I backed up and got in the passenger seat of my car while keeping my pistol pointed low and toward it. We drove off. We discussed what to do and decided to go home. Only a few miles down the road, in the middle of the night, and in the middle of nowhere, we ran into a federal law enforcement officer. He was arresting someone. I explained that we got chased out of camp. The fire was still lit, and I shot toward something big that walked toward us. He instantly went white, pulled the guy out of his back seat, took the cuffs off, and let him go. Explained how lucky he was. He followed us back to our camp. We never used the word Bigfoot or alluded to this being anything weird. He told me he was a federal trapper for 8 years before becoming Leo, whatever Leo is. Law enforcement officer, I think. I don't know. That's the trouble with abbreviating everything nowadays. People don't know what you're talking about. But anyway, he knew what this was and stayed cool and professional. When we came back with federal law enforcement, the ribeye steaks we left out were still there. Nothing was destroyed. I don't know how, but I knew he wasn't going to return. We stayed the night and honestly slept great. Federal trapper/cop was there until around 3 a.m. looking for tracks. He found hair in a huge bedding area right next to our camp about 5 meters away. I think we just stole this big guy's nightly hangout spot. It was beautiful and remote. Easy access to water, and only wilderness to the east. It looked like this thing was watching us for some time. And then it went up the hill and started this whole scary charade. It was huge and only feet away for at least a while. I had no idea. We always talk about our crazy little weird coincidences here on the show. And there you go. I was just listening to Sasquatch Chronicles a week or so ago, and I heard that very guy talking about his encounter on Sasquatch Chronicles. And I didn't have that planned. I was just reading random stories on Reddit, and his story popped up. So there are no coincidences. And if you want to check Chris out telling his story in his own words, check out Sasquatch Chronicles episode 1247. And you can hear Chris telling that exact story. How crazy is that? I'm a huge outdoorsy person, lives in northern Canada, and my family was mostly born and raised out in the bush. Lots of old weird stories, but what has me absolutely convinced is that my cousin seen one time while driving a train. The guy he was operating the train with was thrown into the nut house, and his wife threatened to leave him because he was starting to lose his mind over what they saw. My cousin, on the other hand, had to have long talks with his dad, and even so much as to get a shrink to get over what he saw. He describes the thing as being tall as the green KM signs that you see on the sides of the road. I don't know what a green KM sign is. And he had long hair, but it wasn't thick like on top of a person's head, but more coarse and spread out. And he said it was more gray, like it was an older one. But what really stuck out to me about what he describes is how jacked the thing was. He said it had rippling muscles. You could clearly see through the long hair. He described all the bulging muscles with great detail, about how it looked like a bodybuilder. His stride was about 6 to 8 feet apart, and he wasn't scared of the train. He seen him for a good solid 30 seconds to a minute before passing him, since they managed to slow the train down a bit while approaching him. Where he seen it is a super dense part of the railroad. Closest road in town is miles away. My mom and I were driving east on US 52 in the UP, Michigan, between Briefport and St. Ignace, in one of the stretches where people pull over to get to Lake Michigan. A huge hairy thing crossed the road, going toward the lake, less than 100 feet in front of us. By the time we got alongside of it, it was walking into a small patch of trees. It had rusty and gray, very long hair. It was thin. It was about 30 years ago. I'm still willing to believe it was a very hairy homeless person or someone playing around. My mom will swear to you that it was a Bigfoot. The thing that really sticks out in my memory is the way it went into the trees. People say they get swallowed by the trees, and that's exactly what it was like. It didn't duck under the branches. It just got enveloped by the trees. I was wade fishing a creek near my home in Middle Tennessee during the late 80s. I was near a bluff rock bank on my left that was about 20 feet high, and I kept hearing noises that kind of sounded like someone walking through a pile of dried leaves. I got the eerie feeling that I was being watched, and the hair on the back of my neck stood up. I looked up on top of the bluff and saw a big brown something standing upright looking at me. I only saw it for a couple of seconds, and once I looked at it, it took off running in the upright position and was gone in about 3 seconds, very quickly, to go out of sight from where I was. It scared me to death, and I took off back toward my truck as fast as I could go in the water. I never told anyone until years later, and I never went back there to this day. It's a shame on my part because that creek has some big smallmouth and largemouth bass in it, but I wasn't taking the chance on running into that thing again. This person has 3 encounters. I live in a rural part of Tennessee, about 10 minutes north of Cookeville. The vehicle I was driving at the time was a 2006 Chevy Cobalt. Oh, I feel you. That had 2 high-powered 15-inch subwoofers and deer whistles on it. It was right around 3 a.m., the witching hour, when I was headed to my buddy's house to go pick him up for a job we were supposed to be starting that day, several hours out of town. So I'm driving down this road, jamming hard, doing about 40 to 45-ish on a 2-lane back road. I go to glance down at my phone to check the time, and no sooner than my gaze got to the bottom of the center of my steering wheel, out of the right side of my peripheral vision came this enormous, kind of light grayish mass, followed by a violent jolt. And my car ended up in the complete opposite lane, about 90% into it. I dropped my phone and froze up, not knowing what just happened. I glanced into my rear view, and I could just see that big gray mass standing there in the middle of the road. Just to put this to rest, it was not a deer. Unfortunately, I have hit several deer throughout my vehicle adventures. Totaling my first car, this is not what that was. Damage to the car, you ask? a busted side view mirror and what looks like an indentation of one of the fingers of this thing. That's it. Not one scratch. I think I just made him mad from either scaring away his dinner or was disturbing his nap, or maybe the super low frequencies the subs were putting out he saw as a threat. I have heard on a great many of occasions that they use infrasound as a weapon to paralyze things almost. Another crazy thing is that I kind of knew it was coming almost. As in, when it happened, I felt like, yeah, I seen that one coming. Which sounds absurd as I type it, like a premonition happening in live time. Which also sounds absurd. I don't know, it's hard to explain. His second encounter, a few months later, I was out my driveway, this time around 2 a.m., finishing up a super frustrating night of working on my vehicle. I had just hooked up my laptop to the OBD2 port on my foot, resting on the bottom of the door frame. Laptop propped up on my knee. Thing takes forever to load, so I was starting to nod off, just waiting for it. About 50 yards away, on the other side of my property fence, I hear what I can only describe as an elephant start hauling away from my property, up a small wood line and just crashing, boom, boom. I could literally feel the footsteps going through the ground. I very obviously pooped my pants as I sprinted inside. I mean, you would too. Just a few nights later, my roommate and my buddy were out in the garage, where I was a few nights before, and they too heard and felt the exact same thing. They busted my door down while I was asleep, white as ghosts, saying, "Dude, we thought you were just messing with us. What is that?" A couple weeks later, I was at a buddy's. He was taking the trash out, which is about 20 yards behind the house. I was sitting in the living room, and he had a security camera system set up. As he was walking back into the house, I saw what I can only describe to have been a classic invisible predator cloaked being, and it was stalking him. One of his kids got on the camera of their phone. I inquired about it a little while ago, but apparently it was not retrievable any longer. I did not make the correlation with it being a possible Bigfoot until I started doing research on it about a year later. One more incident that really only has one explanation is right around this same time, as it was peeping on me in my garage at night. It's one night around the same time, a massive part of one of my pine trees just decided to give up the ghost and come down as if it had just been ripped off the main trunk. It was every bit of 15 to 18 inches in diameter, perfectly healthy pine. On a night so calm, there wasn't even wind. On this particular night, it was when I first mentioned this to my roommate as we dropped our buddy off, the same one that I was going to get in the first encounter, for the very first time, as we were passing the exact spot where he hit me like a linebacker would and scooted me almost off the road. He started laughing hysterically, proceeded to roll down his window and stands up and out the window completely and started yelling, "Hey, Bigfoot, why don't you come and try that on me?" My house is only about a mile from where this idiot just yelled, and 30 minutes later is when it got weird. When I say weird, I mean dead silent. There's a half a dozen mutts barking at all hours of the night. Birds that go all night. Crickets, frogs, cicadas, you name it, dude. But when my old pal, Mr. Foot, is around, you bet not a single one of those sounds can be heard. Yes, I made him hang out the window and apologize a couple hours later. That summer, it was almost like this thing would patrol the area a couple times a week. I always knew when he was around because things were dead quiet. If any of you have ever been near a tornado, as it's happening a few miles away, you know what I'm talking about. No wind, no dogs, no bugs, birds, nothing. And it's always between 2 and 3 a.m. it seems. So did I make this thing mad enough to where it just wanted to start intimidating me? Was it just doing it for kicks, or what? And here's this third encounter. I have another story, but it happened to another one of my close friends that I grew up with. It happened on the same road, just on the other side of it. Imagine a giant horseshoe. This was on the right side of it, about 2 or 3 miles as crow flies. Anyway, he broke down right off the small highway, right at the mouth of this road. So, let's call him Joe. Joe had let the talk time on his phone run out without realizing it, so he started to hoof it at the same buddy of mine who lives at the bottom of the road, the one I picked up for work. As he was almost there, probably about an eighth of a mile away, he said he heard some rustling in the woods behind him. He turned around. He said that huge thing jumped out of the woods. And I was so startled and scared, I literally couldn't move. And I peed all over myself. I guess it's a good time to mention that we were all a bunch of redneck dudes. We would pretty much fight a bear with a pocket knife. So him saying this to me took a lot. It actually took him a year after it happened to tell me. And that's only because he had overheard me finally spilling the beans to my old lady about all this one night. And he pulled me aside. He continued, "Man, it hopped onto the road, made some kind of weird noise with its mouth, and then it just laughed at me. Then he hopped back into the woods again and ran away. I asked him to make the noise, and he lowered his head and did the noise you make when you're trying to imitate a horse." "He made horse noises at you?" "Yeah, that's it. Well, the property he came from is a ranch with a bunch of horses on it, and it hit him like a ton of bricks. He was messing with me, wasn't he?" Indeed, I think these things are the ultimate trolls. I mean, what else would you do if you were a cryptid, basically on the run of your whole existence and growing old? I think he's an old-timer due to his grayish hair. That summer he spent in my neck of the woods, he trolled me and my buddies to death, and I kind of miss him. He either kept on moving on, or got dead in, either by father time, or, well, yeah, that's probably it. Hey, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed those creepy Bigfoot encounters. Crazy stuff. I'll see you again next time. God bless.